Welcome back to another episode of the Mainly Hoops podcast. Back with another Big 12 team preview. We've got Tommy Lloyd's Arizona Wildcats. Before we dive in to their outlook for this season, if you are liking our content, please go ahead and like and subscribe. We do appreciate all the support. But diving right in on the offensive end, we'll start here, Cody. What strengths do you see in this offensive group?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of roster turnover here, with mostly going the freshman route, with getting 2 5 stars and a 4 star. Braden Burries, Koa Pete, and Dwayne Aristoti, who might start because they're also brought in Ivan Karchenkov from Germany. Averaged 6 points per game for Bayern Munich. The highest level, really the highest level league in Germany. So he showed that he can play some high level basketball, crack the rotation. So there's definitely a lot of talent here. But ultimately, I think the strength is going to be the transition attack, as it always is with Tommy Lloyd teams. But I think this particular team has a chance to be pretty special in this area with the athletes that they have. Jaden Bradley at the point wants to push in transition, and I think he just profiles much better in the open floor, along with most of these guys. I think a lot of these younger guys are going to benefit from playing in a really open style in their first year of college basketball. I think it's going to make for a really nice transition for a lot of these guys. Like Burries, Aristoti, and Pete are going to be, they really profile better in transition anyway. Especially Koa Pete, in the transition attack as the 4, like he's going to be able to grab a defensive rebound and take the ball up the floor as an initiator. He has a real plus handle for playing the 4. I think he's pretty limited to playing like the power forward position, but I think he brings a lot of skill to that position, even though he doesn't shoot the ball that well. And guys like Karchenkov and Del Orso can run their lanes as shooters to kind of even out this attack. And one other strength I think is offensive rebounding. I think they can truly be one of the best offensive rebounding teams in the entire country. You maintain Krivas, who missed most of the season with an injury, and you bring back Toby Awaka, and those two guys were just elite on the offensive glass last season. Krivas 14.6% offensive rebound rate for his career. Toby Awaka 17.9%, which is pretty ridiculous. And then you add in Koa Pete at the 4, who he's known as a great two-way rebounder coming into college. I think he can get himself to an 11 or 12% offensive rebound rate. I think you have yourself a pretty dominant group. You also get some help on the wings with a guy like Dwayne Aristoti, who's a really good athlete. And I just think there's a lot of size in general on this roster to round out a really good transition attack and probably a really good rim offense, and a team that's just going to attack the glass every possession.
Yeah, and it's a good thing because I think now to sort of shift into their weaknesses, I think it's not a high octane shooting offense, right? We have Anthony Del Orso, right, who last year shot it at 41%. He's a good career 3-point shooter at 37.5%. But it's not like at the guard spot like Jaden Bradley. 32% on super low volume. He's never been much of a shooter, even back to his days at Alabama. So I think like the guard group and just like the shooting ability of that group is not overly strong or overly deep, which is why they're going to have to rely more on getting to the rim, generating opportunities at the foul line, getting out in transition. And then I guess to go on top of that, like the primary guard depth is a little bit lacking here, I would say. I mean, you've got Jaden Bradley, who like 18.2% assist rate, 17% turnover rate, but losing, what they lost last year in Caleb Love and KJ Lewis, two guys that were on the ball a lot too. There's a lot more now that falls on the plate of Jaden Bradley. So I think the guard group is a little bit uncertain, and the perimeter shooting is certainly lacking. But of course, they do have some strengths on the offensive side that you just mentioned that can help to mask some of these things. But I think against some of the best teams, they're going to get exposed a little bit with these weaknesses.
Yeah, I think the shooting is like the real swing piece for this team. I mean, I do think there are guys that have the ability to knock it down. Like you have Braden Burries. I think you have, like Ivan Karchenkov has a real chance to be a shooter. We just haven't seen like the real volume of minutes for him. Like when he was over in Germany playing for Bayern Munich, he played with some really good players, so it was hard for him to crack the rotation. Like he played with over the last 2 years, he played with Carson Edwards, who was at Purdue, like one of the best players in the country. Shabazz Napier, guy who won a national championship at UConn, and was like the best player on that team. Uh, Devin Booker, the Clemson version of Devin Booker, he was there, I think, like 7 or 8 years ago. Elias Harris from Gonzaga averaged 14 points throughout his career there. So he played with really good players. So it was hard for him to crack the rotation. And the fact that he went in there, averaged 6 points per game, I think shows that he's going to be an impactful player right away. That's just going to be a really like, we don't really know what we're getting from the European players right away, but I think we can assume that a lot of them are going to have high floors because they've played high level of competition before. So at the very least, I think he plays 20 minutes, provides value as a shooter. You have a guy like Braden Burries as well. I think he's more of a mid-range operator, but he can shoot it. It just remains to be seen if he can get to that 35% clip. But yes, overall, I do think this team has like a similar issue to last season, which is the perimeter shooting. They were 181st in 3-point percentage last season, and they were 286th in 3-point attempt rate. So it's just not an offense that was comfortable playing on the perimeter. I think they got a little bit more. They're going to be a little bit more comfortable this season, but I think at the expense of a little more volatility and a little less dynamism from the point guard position, because I don't think Jaden Bradley is ready for like a massive on-ball usage role.
No, I would agree with that. So I think we'll see on the offensive end. I think they're going to have to rely on getting out in transition a little bit. But shifting gears now to the defensive side, obviously looking at their roster where, they don't have a ton of like guards, right? They have a kind of a profile of a lot of positional size and versatility, I think, on this end of the floor, right? A bunch of guys between 6'5" and all the way up to 7'2", but they have a bunch of guys in that 6'5" to 6'8" range that I think can guard multiple positions and have some versatility that should help them to be able to get out in transition a little bit more, I think. And then not to mention, right, they've got Krivas, who obviously battled injuries last year. Solid rim protector, 5% block rate. Awaka's been okay in that area, at 3.3% last year at Arizona. Before that, though, at Tennessee, a lesser role, but almost 6% the year before that. So, I think that this end of the floor, they do have some versatility and intriguing pieces.
Yeah, they have some real athleticism and physicality. I think that's kind of the main strength here. I mean, like Jaden Bradley and Braden Burries make up for a super physical backcourt pairing. Then you mentioned Krivas and Awaka, who they can play next to each other as well. I think Awaka has an ability to play the four. He can guard on the perimeter a bit. Not the greatest of rim protectors, but I think his physicality is going to allow him to play the four or the five in this scheme. And then Koa Pete as well. I think he's a super versatile four-man that I think could put all the final pieces together for this defense. He can provide value on the perimeter and as a post defender and good defensive rebounder as well. I think those are two real strengths. I think their first shot defense is going to be a real strength, and I think this is going to be a good defensive rebounding team. I guess I'll just dive into the weaknesses a little bit. I do think true rim protection depth is a concern. You talked about that a little bit. Like Awaka's not a true rim protector. Koa Pete, I don't think can handle any time at the five, and Krivas is he's really not a good lateral mover. He's not a good mover in space in general. And I don't think he's going to play like a massive role, like minutes wise. I mean, average 16 minutes a game when he was out there before. Obviously, there was a pretty stacked front court rotation, but I don't think he's a guy that's going to be able to play more than 20 to 21 minutes a game. But I guess the good thing is you can play Koa Pete and Tobe Awaka together, but I do think it creates somewhat of I'm not going to say poor rim protection duo, but there's just not a guy that I really trust to block shots at a super, super high level. And then one thing to note on Tommy Lloyd defenses is I think they could play a little bit more aggressively to emphasize like creating live ball turnovers, but it's not something that his teams have ever done or have ever. They've just never been great in this area. I think Lloyd's defenses have been a little bit too passive. The turnover rate numbers by year, they go 242nd, 111th, 252nd, and 232nd. I just think he's had good enough athletes at all five positions to be able to create more live ball turnovers. He's played like more of a shell defensively, which is kind of what he did last year. And his teams give up a super high volume of threes, which I think kind of caps their ceiling on this end. Like this is just a list of their 3-point attempt rates allowed. It's 273rd, 210th, 231st, and 81st. I believe that was his first year where they were a little bit better. And they didn't really defend it at a high level either. So they've still had really good defenses throughout his tenure. But I do think he's leaving a little bit on the table. And in particular, like they could be a much better 3-point defense. And I think it's a team that has enough athletes to create more live ball turnovers.
Yeah, I think that's certainly fair, especially with this team. With their size and physicality, I think they can certainly create more turnovers. And I think it would be a benefit to them with some of their offensive deficiencies that I expect in the half court. I think it could play right into greater success for this team. But one other thing I wanted to mention about the defensive end, you mentioned, the lack of true rim protection depth in particular. I wanted to mention Krivas and Awaka, who have both kind of, especially, it seems like Awaka's in foul trouble every night.
Oh yeah.
And Krivas, right, while the sample size wasn't large last year, go back to his freshman year, 36 games played, 6.1 fouls per 40, 5.1 last year in his 8 games played. And then you look at Awaka, who in his 3 years, 5.4, 7.6, and 5.9 fouls per 40. So both guys, I think, are guys that will be in foul trouble often, which I think doesn't bode super well, because beyond those two, who already we've kind of said aren't true rim protectors, the depth is not there. So I think that is a little bit of a concern if those two can't shore up disciplinary issues. Where does Tommy Lloyd turn? Because like you mentioned, Koa Pete, that's not really his. He's not going to be able to be a primary rim protector.
Yeah, I mean, those are very fair points. I kind of knew Tobe Awaka was a hack from his days at Tennessee. Those defenses always just play with a ton of physicality. I mean, I think Tommy Lloyd defenses, I think, like I mentioned, they're a little bit too passive, but the fact that he's still fouling a decent amount is not really a great look. And they have some further down depth pieces in a guy like Sidi Gay, who is coming from Senegal, 6'11". Not sure how ready he is for the college basketball game. Maybe he's able to emerge, but overall, I still think this is a super high floor defense, and I think this is just more nitpicking on our end with our outlook here on this defense. But because Tommy Lloyd defenses have been fantastic throughout his first 4 seasons. He's been inside the top 40 in all 4 years, and he had a top 10 defense 2 years ago. So I do think he's able to coach defense, and he's at least able to recruit defense.
Yeah, no, I agree. Shifting gears now, team MVP, team X Factor. Who do you see on this team?
And my team MVP is Koa Pete. I think he's going to do a lot of things on both ends. I think particularly more so on the defensive end with his versatility there, because like we talked about with the big men, the foul trouble issues, I think he's going to have to step into a more prominent role defensively. He can guard on the perimeter, can take on post responsibility. So, and from an offensive standpoint, he can do a lot of things outside of 3-point shooting. He's not a guy that's really going to step out there and provide much efficiency. Can score it in the mid-range, can score it through the post, has a real plus handle. Like I mentioned, there's a passing ability in there. I think there's a really quality skill set that I think is going to be important for a half court, for the half court setting that we are a bit concerned about. So I do think he emerges as the best player on this team. But the X factor I have is another freshman. I have Braden Burries as the X factor. I think we kind of know what Jaden Bradley is as an offensive player, but there's a lot of guys on this team that we don't really know about. We know Bradley's not going to have a high ceiling on this end. He doesn't shoot it well enough. I think Braden Burry's shooting ability, his particularly on the ball, and then a little bit as a movement shooter are going to be probably the biggest swing pieces for this Arizona team this year. I think like guys like Karchenkov can, and I mean, Delorso we know is a good shooter, but like particularly Karchenkov and Burries, I think are going to be super important to this team from a perimeter offense perspective.
Yeah, I like the Burries take, and I for MVP I went the same direction as well. Koa Pete, I think he's too valuable to this team in a lot of ways, both ends of the floor impacting the game, and his transition ability too should be super impactful right away. Even if the half court offensive game isn't as like dominant, I guess, which I think it has some question marks. But X Factor, I went with the tandem of the two bigs, and I went there because of the defensive end and the rim protection. I went there because of the foul concerns. If they can stay healthy and on the floor, I think that it'll certainly raise the ceiling of this team. If not, then I think there are some concerns as to what Arizona can ultimately be, and it kind of can cap them overall. So anyway, ceiling and floor for this team. What do you feel on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think they can finish as the second best team in the Big 12. I think they can be like a 2 seed in the tournament, and there's a chance they can make an Elite Eight or even getting Tommy Lloyd to his first Final Four. I just think the talent that he's bringing in, the accumulation of of freshmen that he brought in, creates volatility, but I think it also creates a higher ceiling than he's had in years past. Obviously, he had I think it was year one at Arizona, the Benedict Mathurin, Dalen Terry, Coloco team, I think had a real ceiling to get to the Final Four. They were a 1 seed, just kind of, I think they lost in the Sweet 16 to Houston. But I do think this team has a similar ceiling in that regard. Like if guys like Burries and Pete and Karchenkov can reach their ceiling, I think this team can be really good. Their floor, they could finish like 6th or 7th in the Big 12. Like if the offense really starts to sputter and the rim protection and there's foul trouble issues, I think there is a world where they slide down the Big 12 ranks a bit. And I still think they're a tournament team at their floor. I think there could be like an 8 or a 9 seed overall, but ultimately I think there's going to be a rock solid team this year.
Yeah, I would agree. I think at their ceiling, they're a top 3 team in the Big 12. I think floor like 6th or 7th, and I think it could just be because of the offensive end, because I think the defense will keep them alive anyway with the versatility of that side of the ball. And like you said, I think they are a tournament team at their floor regardless. There are some really good teams in this league. There are some not so good teams in this league that they should be able to handle just fine. So I think they'll be good enough to make the tournament regardless. But yeah, how about bold prediction? What do you have there?
Yeah, my bold prediction, I don't think it's like an actual prediction, but I was just kind of looking through the roster and I was like, there's a real chance that this team could have 5 players drafted in this year's coming draft. Like you look at, I think all the freshmen or all the newcomers that haven't played any college basketball yet have a real chance. Like Burries and Pete, and maybe even Dwayne Aristodi could all get drafted in this upcoming draft. And then a guy like Karchenkov, who has some real upside, could end up getting picked as well if the shooting ability translates as well as some people think it will. And then I think a guy like Jaden Bradley could like end up at the back end of a draft, maybe even in the second round because of his defensive abilities. He's a super wide body guy that can guard multiple positions. And obviously the offensive stuff is a concern, but I think a team could potentially take a flyer on a real physical two-way guard like Bradley.
Yeah, that's fair. For me, I went a different direction. I went another individual statistic. I said Braden Burries averages 12 and a half plus points per game. I mean, I think it's not super bold, but I think, the opportunity is going to be there. Obviously, after losing all the shot volume they had from last season, um, he should have an opportunity to step right into a role where, he can look to score the ball right away from night one.
I would agree. I mean, I think he's probably the most talented player on the ball as like a 3-level scorer on this roster. So I definitely think that's in the realm of possibilities. I think at his ceiling, I think he can average 15. I
Yeah.
am a little bit worried about the perimeter efficiency, but his size is definitely going to play up right away.
Yeah, definitely. So we'll see what we have in store from the Arizona Wildcats, but we'll wrap things up here. Thank you for listening to the Mainly Hoops podcast.